speakers, and equally grateful to all of you, the audience, as we need to have more questions, comments, more participation and interactions during the day, as much as possible, as much as time permits. But later on, you are going to hear our initiative about creating a strategic ecosystem with university, industry, government, and community partnerships. So I will save it more details for a 2 o'clock session. But this is my great pleasure to introduce to you the first distinguished panel session with the academic perspective. So we wanted to see that academia that is playing nowadays a role of the research and innovation engine, and in one way, the incubator towards the early to mid-level to advanced translation, but every time is starting with the creative minds in a very effective way in academia with the faculty and students working on bringing out the innovative solution to unmet market needs. But as I mentioned in the very beginning, you can't do it alone. So we need guidance, we need partnership, we need the stakeholders participating into that particular translational pathways from lab to market so that the solutions could be cost-effective, could be feasible, could be adaptable, and could be scaled to larger scale users' impact. So with that thing in mind, it is my great pleasure and honor to introduce the panelists of the Academic Perspective Distinguished Panel Session. And the first, I would like you to join me in welcoming Dr. Craig Arnold. Is a professor of is a professor at Princeton University, but also as the Vice Dean for Innovation. Craig leads the Princeton Innovation Initiative and oversees the university's effort to grow Princeton's culture of innovation across discipline. Craig? Next, I will like to invite Dr. Lisa Rodenburg. She's a professor in the Department of Environmental Sciences at Rutgers University. She's an expert on source appointment of PCBs and other organic contaminants. The next, Dr. Zhiming Zhang, Assistant Professor of Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Rowan University. His current research work includes sustainable water and wastewater treatment using biological and physiochemical methods to remove legacy and emerging contaminants. And then we have my pleasure to invite Dr. Dibyendu Sarkar, Professor of Environmental Engineering and Founding Director of the Stevens Center for Sustainability at Stevens Institute of Technology. He's broadly trained as an environmental geochemist with research interest in environmental remediation, risk assessment, and green technology development. And then I would like to invite Dr. Arjun Venkatesan, Associate Professor in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at NJIT. His research focuses on occurrence, fate, and treatment of toxic chemicals in the environment with a current focus on PFAS. Dr. And then it's my pleasure to invite Dr. Wen Zhang, Professor of NJIT's Newark College of Engineering in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. Dr. Zhang leads the Nanotechnology in Sustainable Environment and Agricultural Laboratory. Dr. Zhang. So the way the panel session is formatted, and the panelists know about it, that we are going to go through the first round of 5 minutes presentation on the vision, the leadership, and their academic perspective of how they are seeing the PFAS-based research, what they are engaged with in bringing the innovative solution and their feasibility of translating them into the societal applications. But individual research are going to talk about that, but first I requested Craig to join us because he has a very, very unique leadership role to work across the disciplines at Princeton Innovation Initiative, and without that particular kind of support, we are kind of, you know, handicapped in academia. We need leaders and we need the institutional support. So in your perspective, you know, tell us something about what you think.
Wow.
So your presentation is up over there, and
should I come up there to?
no, anyway, you can have, but where the, oh, there is a clicker.
Well,
The green better.
all right, super. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, and it's really great to be here. So yeah, so you know, I put a few slides together, a few thoughts together to give a sense of some of the overview of the things that we're doing at Princeton, and maybe, you know, given Tom's sort of intro there, I'll say a few words before I start. But you know, I think that the key thing about, you know, what we're talking about when it comes to the translation of innovations within universities, of course, is figuring out how we support this translation through, I'm going to call it the valley of death that we're all familiar with, right? I think in general, you know, we academics tend to think that once we're done understanding the problem, it's ready to give to industry. And it's very much not the case. And so a lot of what we do at Princeton with respect to that is really supporting the faculty through that next stage of research, maybe up to the state where we might call it development, if you will. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to give a few examples in the next couple minutes here of some of the particular projects that have translated, or maybe you're in the course of translating. You know, of course, we have quite a lot. There's many things happening at Princeton with respect to water purification, PFAS work. Since I'm the one giving the talk, of course, I chose things that are connected to stuff that I do. So you'll see our stuff in there as we go through this. So first off, I want to play a little video of one of our spin-outs. If you can play the video in the back there. And this is a particular spin-out company based on research from, I'll stand up, which is a little easier. Can you hit play, please? Thanks. There should be some sound with it. Excellent. So it's a little general promo video here we put together.
Water is a challenge that millions of people face every day. We have developed a new approach to water filtration that could bring clean water to millions of households around the world, especially those that lack access to infrastructure. I'm Arjun, professor of chemical and biological engineering and dean of the graduate school. Our technology is designed to produce clean water using freely available solar energy. The device works like a sponge, soaking up only clean water and leaving behind the contaminants. What makes this approach accessible to millions of people around the world, however, is that the process is driven by the heat of the sun. Most solar-powered water filtration devices use sunlight to evaporate water, which is very time-consuming. Other methods require electricity or another source of power to pump water through a membrane.
At the heart of our device is a gel material that can change its structure as a result of change in temperature. At room temperature, the gel can act as a sponge, soaking up water. When the sun heats the gel to 33 degrees, it does the opposite and pushes the water out of its pores. When you leave the gel in the sun to heat up, it pushes the clean filtered water back out into a container.
To me, the most exciting thing about this work is that it can operate completely off-grid, both at large scales and small scales. This means that the technology can be assessed globally, including locations where low-cost, non-powered water purification is needed.
Okay. Okay, so this is one example of, can we get to the next slide here? I'm clicking, but nothing's happening. Oh, I clicked too far. Okay, excellent. Oh, too far. Okay, so this is a good example of that sort of nexus between the research side and the development side and the company starting side. And so this was a work that actually I was collaborating with Rod at the time on creating these bio-inspired hydrogels. And what's interesting about the technology is that the way it works is by using this phenomena in hydrogels where at a certain temperature it'll change from being hydrophilic to hydrophobic. And so what you can do is at low temperature simply absorb water, but because it'll only absorb water and not microplastics and other things, you have this water trapped in this membrane. Simply putting it in the sun will heat it up enough, it only needs about 30 degrees Celsius, and then it will give the water back. And so now you have a purified water process. Now, of course, that by itself is really good science, but what's the next step to the commercialization? And so Rod started this company back in 2022, but what's notable is that along the way we provided a good bit of support for that research development nexus. So we had a number of internal supporting mechanisms that allowed him to explore some of the more applications-focused part of that work, and then connecting it with some of the other programs that we have, such as our MRSEC, going after STTR money, our NSF I-Corps program, really has allowed this team to move forward. And now this company, it is an ongoing entity. They've been working towards improving the design, testing the durability, and ultimately identifying opportunities to scale up the technology. And so I think this is a good example of the kinds of ways where we're going to move the science into a technology, into an application, ultimately into a company. The next example that I want to give is some work from our group, and this is related to, let's say, a replacement for these types of activated carbons. And what we did is we've been developing these hierarchical graphitic aerogels, and these are very, very low density structures that have really beneficial properties for water filtration and purification. And so basically our process it's kind of simple. That's why you can manufacture these aerogels at high volume. We start with a protein precursor, and we simply put it through an appropriate thermal processing conditioning, and as a result, it actually foams up. And so you start with something that's mostly like a waste protein, like either hemoglobin or whey or other types of waste proteins, and you can turn it into very large volumes of these aerogel materials, and you can see some of these structures here. It almost looks like a sponge in terms of its structure. When we test this material out, it's very efficient at removing microplastics because it has all this open space, right? So a typical activated carbon has a high surface area, but not a lot of open volume. In our case, you have a tremendous amount of volume, and we can achieve large collections of microplastics, as well as some of the unique structure of these sheets that allows it to trap ions. And I won't get into the science of that right here, but recently we've been applying this towards PFAS and PFOA here. Actually, my student informed me that my number here is wrong. It's actually 65% on the first pass, and then we're working towards optimizing that. But in fact, this material is more than just a material that can be used for a filter bed or something like that. And it brings me to sort of the third example that I'm going to use here, and I know I don't have a lot of time, and maybe we can play this video. Here's another example of the kinds of work we're doing at Princeton and how we're in the process of translating it. So can I hit the button? Oh, go ahead, please. Thanks. And this one is about a microbial approach to PFAS.
A class of chemicals called per- and polyfluorinated alkyl substances, or PFAS, are commonly referred to as forever chemicals because they're very persistent and they're found virtually everywhere, in global water supplies, soil and air, and even the blood of humans and animals. I am Peter Jaffe. I'm a professor in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. There are about 8,000 different PFAS, and they're used in all kinds of products, such as firefighting foam, non-stick pans, and pizza boxes. The two most common ones are PFOA and PFOS, for which EPA has issued health guidelines because they have been linked with harmful health effects. What makes them so persistent is the strength of the carbon-fluorine bond, which is the strongest covalent bond in organic chemistry and nearly impossible to break down. So these chemicals stick around a long time after they've been used. This is especially true for the per or fully fluorinated compounds like PFOA and PFOS. My team has discovered a bacterium called Acidimicrobium A6 that is capable of breaking down this bond and biodegrade these harmful chemicals. A big challenge, however, is that these bacteria are very slow growing, and we're currently looking at ways that we could speed up this production, for which we are developing novel bioelectrochemical reactors and novel means of supplying required nutrients. Once this can be done, these bacteria have the potential to be grown at sites that have high concentrations of PFAS, such as airports, naval facilities, and wastewater treatment plants. We are also exploring their use for applications like remediations of PFAS-contaminated biosolids and in situ treatment of contaminated sediments. This is the first time that an organism has been shown to break down perfluorinated compounds, including PFOA and PFOS, and we think it could be a highly effective means of cleaning up PFAS-contaminated systems.
Great. So this our little outro here. So this is another, really important innovation in this space. And so, instead of looking at the traditional, let's filter, let's block, this particular methodology looks at how do we actually break down these materials. Peter Jaffe's been studying this particular bacteria for probably over a decade. And it's a very unique microbe in that it undergoes, or it can create this Fiamox process. And that's a process that's used to break down ammonia. It's an electrochemical process. And so, in short, what he's been able to do is to design these microbial electrolytic cells that require the use of iron and other conductive agents to feed this bacteria and allow it to undergo the particular electrochemical reaction that can break these bonds. Now, the problem with that approach from the scale-up and commercialization side is that it's too slow. And so you need to figure out a way to make it go faster. And so that's where I'm going to come back to this HGA, this hierarchical graphitic aerogel material that we've been playing with. If you combine that as the electrode material, what you get is better porosity for flow, a better environment for the bacterial growth, better control over the nutrients, and of course, good electrical conductivity. And in our preliminary results, we're showing significant increase in the breakdown of these harmful chemicals. And so this example, this microbial electrolytic cell, is something that's in the process of translating. We've been working with Peter to help figure out how to structure what's the appropriate way to scale, what's the appropriate way to commercialize this. Again, things like our NSF I-Core come to play, and other programs that we're running at Princeton. And so I've already spoken for longer than I should. I will stop and pass it over.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to make sure that we have some time left. We have only up to 12:30 for the audience question, because that's very important. So I request everybody should keep 5 minutes presentation. So next I'm going to request Dr. Rodenburg.
Do I have my slides?
Yeah, that's fine.
So I'm Dr. Rodenburg from Rutgers, but both of my kids went to NJIT, so. And now for something completely different. What I do is just totally different from what you were just hearing about. Thank you. I don't have slides yet, so I can't advance them, but is that what I have to do? Who do I click? All right, anyway, so I'm a data miner. I don't do anything. I sit in a chair. I don't have a lab anymore. I'm just really interested in the data. And you know that any branch of science has become mature when it starts to produce enough data that people can mine it. And so we're just getting there with PFAS. Really, in the last 5 or so years, I've started to see enough data that I can actually do something with it. And so I've been working on trying to understand sources of PFAS, particularly wastewater, but in other systems as well. And there's a lot of things that you can do here. Some of this comes out of my background doing expert witness work. I'm not doing any expert witness work specifically with PFAS, but I am working with PCBs. And so that's something that I think about a lot, about how do you determine what the sources are and how do you prove it? How do you prove it in a legal sense? So I'm trying to determine some of the sources of PFAS, particularly in wastewater and other systems. So that can include doing fingerprinting, looking at the various mixtures of chemicals and seeing where they might be coming from, tracking their sources, doing mass balances, because just because you know that this source is putting some mass into the system doesn't mean it's big enough to really explain the concentrations that you're seeing. Looking at historical records, doing sampling right at the fence line of industries, things like that. But PFAS are really, really hard, as I'm sure you know, for many reasons, and it's really difficult to determine the sources of PFAS. First of all, there's analytical problems. Many of you know this, right? You're probably using, maybe some of you are using 1633, maybe? How many people use, okay, a few people using 1633, and you know that that's very expensive, and that even with 1633, you have a lot of non-detects. So these are problems, and the analytical methods for PFAS have been changing so rapidly, it's very difficult to keep track. You know, 1633 only came out a little over a year ago. And the other big problem that we have with PFAS is the transformation of these unmeasured, perhaps unmeasurable precursors into things that are measured. I don't know if you noticed, but I asked the question before for that, the talk about the granular activated carbon system about the precursors. Because how do you know that what leaves your plant has already been converted to final products? Because if those precursors are continuing to convert as the water is moving through your system, you could have more of the final PFOA or other PFAS showing up in people's drinking water. You didn't see it leave your plant. So how can you control what's leaving your plant when you can't even see it? Then you have sort of this chromatographic effect of PFAS moving through groundwater. Some of them are moving faster than others because of their size, because of their charge. And the other thing that's a real problem for PFAS, as you probably know, is that the companies that are using PFAS are constantly changing their formulations, partly for, you know, technical reasons to get better performance, but frankly, partly to evade regulation. And so that makes it really difficult to understand. We're always looking in the past. I can maybe tell you what the sources were to a landfill 30 years ago. Not so clear what the sources are today. So our group is focusing on understanding the sources of PFAS that are far from the point of release, both in space and in time. And that's really because of, you know, there's lots of other people who are looking really close to the source. There's lots of people who are working for the Department of Defense or have contracts through the Department of Defense because they have big issues related to PFAS. And so there's a lot of people with a lot of money looking very close to the source, trying to establish that linkage. So we're looking a little bit further away. And we're also trying to understand the fate processes. What are the processes that are transforming one PFAS into another and allowing them to move through the environment? So this is the EPA 1633 method. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. It measures 40 different PFAS compounds. It depends on who you ask, but there's somewhere between 6,000, 15,000, thousands of different PFAS that are out there. And we're measuring 40. Right, and I saw a few hands of people who said that they're using this method. There's also the new EPA method 1621. Anybody using that? One person. A total absorbable organic fluorine. So that's supposed to tell you the total amount of PFAS. You don't know exactly which compounds, but you know the total amount. But nobody's using it, from what I can tell. Very, very few people using it. So really what we know is these 40. And we know that there's other stuff out there. We don't know what it is. We don't know what it's doing. So that's one of the things I'm thinking about. And for a data miner, this is a tough question because you're talking about the data you don't have. I have this data, but what about the data I don't have on these precursors? So this is just some data from the California Environmental Monitoring Program. And you can see these are concentrations of PFAS in nanograms per liter, right? And we know that the standard's somewhere around 4, depending on the compound. Some of these compounds are regulated, some of them are not. But you know, this is average across, I think it was 27 different wastewater treatment plants in California, and you can see that they're, you know, definitely failing. First of all. Second of all, if you look at the influent versus the effluent, guess what? There's more coming out of your plant than going into your plant. You guys have seen this, you know what I'm talking about. Well, what the heck is this stuff? Where is it coming from? What is it? We don't know. So we're trying to understand maybe what it is, where it's coming from. So of these different PFAS, these are the ones that are generally detectable using that method 1633. And you notice there's only about 16 compounds here. The other ones from 1633 are generally not detectable. And you see that all the ones in blue are going up in concentration from influent to effluent. So it's only a couple that actually go down. Everything else is, there's more coming out of your plant than what's going in. And why is that? So we've been looking at the data, and this is just one example because I'm really going to keep to 5 minutes because I promised I would. This is just one example of showing the difference between, showing the difference between the main source. This is just a factor analysis, so we're calling this B number 1. But this is the source of what's going into the plant, and then you see that what's coming out in the effluent is totally different. And this B3 is the conversion of precursors to final products. So we're able to get some kind of quantification of how much of the stuff coming out of your plant is from conversion of unmeasurable precursors, okay, which is hard to do because at least some of the PFAS coming in are also partitioning onto the sludge. So how do you back that out? So this is one way we have of doing it using the data mining. And what you see is that at some plants, you have a huge amount of precursors, a lot of conversion of unmeasurable stuff to precursors, but then at other plants like this one, not so much. And we're trying to understand why. What is it about these plants that's different? Is it something about the plant? Is it something about the sewer system? Is it something about the treatment train? Is it the industries in the sewer shed? You know, what are the things that are causing these different plants to behave very differently? So that's 5 minutes of what I'm doing.
Thank you. Dr. Venkatesan? Yes.
Hi, everyone. I also have a lot of slides, but I realize we heard a lot about PFAS today, so I'm going to keep it very short. But I do need my slides. Okay. Should I click? All right, so I can get started. So my lab is an Emerging Contaminants Research Lab, and oh no, that's Dr. Sarkar's. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. So I represent the group like Emerging Contaminants Research Lab. So what we do is track the emerging contaminants. So we look at the occurrence, how they flow in the built-in natural environment, and we also look at treatment and remediation of emerging contaminants, right? So since this is a CTR workshop, so what we really do, we take our bench scale experiments and batch experiments and we translate it to do pilot scale demonstrations, and I've been lucky enough to be involved even in a full scale demonstration of some of the technologies to remove emerging contaminants, okay? So we've heard a lot about PFAS. I'm not gonna go through this, but I like this slide because our group put together this, and it's really nice representation of how PFAS flows in our environment. And one take-home message, PFAS has become a new element in our Earth's water cycle, something that you want to register, right? It's like a new element, it's scary, and it's everywhere, all right? And I want to highlight like some of the work that we have done in the past 10 years or so. So I've been involved in PFAS research since I was doing my PhD, and we reported the first nationwide occurrence of PFAS in biosolids. At that time, no one knew how what's PFAS, or not many people knew how important it was to understand the flow of PFAS in the environment. And it was, so since then I've been like exploring what's happening with this group of contaminants, right? So I have a lot of these figures there, but let's just focus on the big picture. Why is it difficult and challenging to capture all PFAS, okay? First, they occur in the environment at very, very low concentration, parts per trillion, parts per billion, right? So obviously you can't destroy PFAS directly in water samples. This is not energy efficient. So you need to first capture these chemicals, concentrate it to such a high level, then you can destroy it, right? And when we concentrating such low levels of PFAS, you have competing substances, right? You have other contaminants, other organics, other inorganics at parts per million levels, parts per thousand levels. So your capture technology is challenged by the matrices that you're being involved, right? So that's one. Second, we've heard a lot about PFAS is not just one or two chemicals. We're talking about more than 15,000 chemicals so far. And each of these chemicals have different properties. That's what these, is there a light? Oh, yeah. So that's what this shows. Like the properties of these PFAS vary with how big they are, how small they are, what's the functional groups, what's the degree of fluorination, everything changes in properties. So one technology, unfortunately, is not a solution for all the PFAS. So we need to keep that in mind, all right? And another thing that I also want to look at, some of these PFAS, they transform in the environment, like what our previous speaker mentioned. And I want to highlight one case study. Like in New York, they were regulating 1,4-dioxane, totally different contaminant, not related to PFAS at all. They were installing advanced oxidation processes across because it works really well to remove 1,4-dioxane. And I was involved in these pilot testing projects, and we measured PFAS. So let's see what happens to PFAS. Interestingly, PFAS concentration increased after advanced oxidation process. So before treatment, it was below the regulatory limit, and after treatment, it was above the regulatory limit of New York State. Now, that's a problem, right? So when you're looking at these systems, you need to look holistically, not just as PFAS, but also looking at these other contaminants and how they impact the presence of PFAS in your source water and drinking water, right? So the other question comes, why is it so difficult to treat PFAS, destruct PFAS? And we've heard this a lot. Carbon-fluorine bond is one of the strongest in the universe, and I just put together that. In addition to that, the carbon-fluorine bond energy, like how much energy you need to break it down, it depends on the structure of the PFAS compound too. If it's small, it's much harder to degrade. If it's longer, it's relatively easy to degrade, right? So many of the destructive technology finally works well with PFOA and PFOS, which are these long chain compounds, but when it comes to short chains and ultra short chains, you're challenged by it because they are much more tougher. They are much more harder to be degraded in the environment. So something to think about. That's why a mass balance approach is important, right? Just because you have a disappearance of PFAS in your destruction technology, you didn't solve the problem. You need to do a fluorine mass balance to know really if you can destruct it all and fluorinate it and convert it to inorganic fluorine. Okay, so I have this slide, and since we are already tight on time, these are my perspective of what are the needs. Why are we focused on these different aspects of PFAS, right? For detection, obviously we've heard a lot about it's time consuming, it is expensive, we don't have analytical standards for many of the PFAS that's being detected. What are the needs? We need quick turnaround times. We actually need presence or absence tests. That's actually very important in consumer products, and even that, then you can like employ these expensive analytical methods to look at PFAS, all right? Then we need real-time sensoring, like monitoring sensor development. And also surrogate measurements, like the previous speaker mentioned about total organic fluorine. But we are challenged by those methods because the detection limit for those approaches like parts per billion, and we are looking at parts per trillion levels. So we need more improvement in our analytical methods. For capture technologies, like long-chain PFAS are efficiently remote infiltration systems and other systems, but we are challenged again by ultra-short chains and short chains, which are popping up more and more in the environment. So we have to be concerned about all of this, right? So in the needs is we need to think about efficient adsorbents or combination of technologies that's looking at both ultra-short chain PFAS and also long-chain PFAS removal. And we also need to be more realistic, right? Now GAC is like a go-to technology. Everyone is installing granular activated carbon. So we need to look at technology that can complement existing system. Otherwise, your O&M is going to, I have to finish now? So, okay. So anyway, so I have the last two slides. Just one more minute. So in destruction aspect, again, we need to close the mass balance. And right now, all the destruction technologies are standalone technologies, right? So we have to take the concentrated waste, go to their facility to get treated. So we also need to develop technology that can be treated on site, right, where you generated the waste. So that's why our technologies, what we have developed, from our lab comes. One is a pre-treatment technology that can enhance the performance of existing granular activated carbon filtration system to remove short chains and ultra short chains and also increase the carbon lifetime. And we are currently demonstrating this at pilot scale. For destruction technology, we developed a chemical destruction of PFAS, right? No high energies, ambient room temperatures, and ambient conditions, we are able to destroy PFAS just chemically and convert completely defluorinated, right? So, and these are technologies are like kind of going into the needs and addressing what's the current needs. All right, thank you very much. My time is up.
Thank you. Dr. Zhang.
Okay, good morning, everyone. This is Zhiming from Rowan. I'll try to keep my presentation short because my stuff, my research is largely overlapped with Arjun's research. So I'll briefly talk about PFAS contamination in water. I'll walk you through there are three different aspects. One is the prevalence of the PFAS, and then what are the sources are, and then what are the current and emerging treatment methods. So I think pretty much some of you have already seen these figures on the left, which is from the USGS report last year. And from the report, there are over 70 million of people who are using the groundwater with detectable PFAS levels. That's a big portion for a direct contact. And on the right side is a global map image about the PFAS detection from groundwater, drinking water, and surface water. And those samples are used. They are using the EU guidelines. And you see the red dots. Those are above the 100 ppt level, which is the EU guidelines. Regardless of the regional variance in regulations, in monitoring, but we do see the widespread of PFAS in the water systems. And we know the widespread of water in water resources, and we would like to know how we are impacted by PFAS through two major ways. One is drinking water, and the other is consumption of food. Let's use fish as an example. And for the PFAS in tap water, this is also a study by USGS, and they sampled over 700 tap water samples, and they found at least one PFAS compound was detected for about 45% of the samples. And those samples are not only sampled in urban areas, they are also in rural, in suburban areas. So it means PFAS is in the tap water for both residential and industrial locations. And for the PFAS in fresh water fish, is a study conducted by the EPA a couple years ago, and they basically sampled the freshwater fish across the U.S. and they found PFAS in every single fish samples, and the median concentration for the freshwater fish is about 9,500 nanograms per kilogram. With even higher median numbers, around 12,000 nanogram per kilogram for the Great Lakes region. To give you some aspects about the concentration, so basically consumption of one serving of those contaminated fish is equivalent to drinking the water with a PFAS concentration about 300 times higher than the EPA level for a month. So PFAS is everywhere, and we need to take care of these PFAS. And those are some the PFAS sources, which is also overlap with Arjun's slides. So I will briefly talk about this. We do see PFAS discharged from the industrial areas through the wastewater or the use of AFFF in firefighter trainings, especially for the military sites and the airports, and also household items. Wastewater treatment plant is one source for PFAS contamination because in the effluent we do see PFAS high levels of PFAS, because those wastewater treatment plants are not designed to remove PFAS, or they are not capable of removing PFAS during the treatment chain. And all of those PFAS, containing wastewater, can go to surface water and then go to soil. Dr. Dibs from Stevens Tech will talk about the soil contamination, on the PFAS. And last slide is about the current and emerging treatment methods. So a very commonly used one is through sorption using different types of filter media, mentioned by active carbon, the resins, biochar water treatment residuals, and membrane filtration, fractionation, and precipitation are also effective methods to remove or to capture and remove PFAS, but those are non-destructive methods. And destructive ones like supercritical water oxidation, electrochemical oxidation, the plasma, electron beams, those can destroy the PFAS molecules. But we need to track the intermediates and to keep the mass balance of the PFAS during the treatment process. And last one will be the biodegradation through the phenols co-metabolism, as Craig mentioned. Professor Peter Jeffrey has been using this, the A6 microbe to destroy PFAS. That's the general introduction about the PFAS in water. I haven't introduced the specific technology we use in the lab. Basically, we use the physical sorption and biodegradation. But if you are interested, we can talk offline. Thank you.
Dr. Sarkar.
Until the time my slide comes up, this is what happens if you put 6 professors on one single table. Each one of us are used to talking 2.5 hours straight on weeknights. All right, so I'll try to keep it short as long as my slide deck shows up. Well, my name is Dibs Sarkar. I'm a professor of environmental engineering at Stevens Institute of Technology. And I am not going to actually talk about the research that I do. I have 2 postdocs and 4 PhD students who came here with me, and they would be more than excited to talk about their work and how we are remediating PFAS in different types of environmental media as part of the show and tell that we have in the afternoon session. I think it's table number 21. What I'm going to talk about today, yeah.
You have the clicker.
Oh, okay. Yeah, what I'm going to talk about today is PFAS in soils. In my opinion, it's one of the most important environmental sources of PFAS, and quite often the most overlooked ones. As you can see, we already talked about different sources of PFAS here. We didn't talk about soils. And why is that? I think it's because we do not actually realize that there is a problem until the time the problem becomes an issue. And that's the time we start looking at, okay, what is the source of this problem? Okay, and in most of the cases, I'll tell you the source of the problem are the soils. Okay, I will just give you a couple of examples which have been taken straight out of the headlines. And that is not one way we should try to identify a problem when we read a newspaper. Okay, so this is more recent, and this is in our neck of the woods. This is in Warren County in Washington Township. They have a network of private wells that they use there. And all of a sudden in 2023, PFOA and PFOS showed up in some of the wells. And in one of the wells, I think it is a storage facility out there, the PFOS was 6 parts per billion and PFOA was 8 parts per billion. Just to put it in perspective, the EPA recommended limits are 4 parts per trillion of PFOA and PFOS. So it was more than 1,000-fold. That's astronomical. All right, so then they tried to figure out what the source was and identified this thing here, this parcel of land. It's a 50 acres parcel of land off Highway 31, I think. It used to be owned by a farmer who for some reason allowed a textile manufacturing company to dump their liquid sludge in his farmland for a better part of 20 years, between 1950 and 1970. And then obviously PFAS got into the soil and ultimately it started leaching to the aquifer. So this one is further south in a very conservative state actually in Texas, south of Johnson City, south of Fort Worth, and a large farmland. All of a sudden the farmers started seeing something odd, they were getting cattle's drooling all the time, lethargic, then stillborn calves one after another, and then they started seeing fish kills. So they actually alerted the authorities. They went there and tested the water and found out that again, the stillborn calves, had one of them had a liver concentration of PFOS of 600 parts per billion. And the water had 1.4 parts per billion of all PFAS species combined. So they found out, the source to be a biosolid that they have used for the longest period of time called Synagro, which had PFAS in it, and obviously, with time, nature took its course. I'll leave you with a couple of very startling statistics, USDA Agricultural Statistical Service, they actually estimate 20 million acres of farmland is contaminated with PFAS. And the Environmental Working Group reported that 715 military bases, which is almost 80% of all the military bases that we have in this country, they have high concentrations of PFAS in soil and water. So just to wrap it up, what are the sources of this? I've already spoken about biosolids, all our the wastewater treatment plants, as Zhiming said, that again, they don't actually filter PFAS. It actually has a opposite effect. It gets water from domestic wastewater, which is a lot of PFAS coming from our laundry as well as some other household products. But again, many of them actually take landfill leachates. And typically, the landfill leachates have much more PFAS than domestic water. So we recently worked with a bunch of wastewater treatment plants in New Jersey, and we found that again, the ones that had landfill leachate, they had a bunch of different types of PFAS at pretty high concentration. And the other one that Zhiming mentioned are the AFFF or firefighting foams that militaries use all the time, particularly in Air Force bases where they are actually using it for fire drills. Okay, it is loaded with PFAS, and that's why it's such a good, firefighting foam. So we actually worked with a bunch of military bases, and some of them are given here. As you can see that again, we found PFAS in this Baker's dozen showed up in almost all the soils, and in almost all the cases, PFAS, the sulfonate species, long chain sulfonate species, was the dominant one. But in one of them, we saw a very high concentration of hexane sulfonate, which is a short chain sulfonate species. So what does it tell you? Number one, it tells you that PFAS is undergoing speciation in the soil, and number two is that again, since this is a short chain one, it is very much water soluble. And so since it's very much water soluble, it's very easy for plants to take them up. So it poses a whole lot more danger than the longer chains which are easily adsorbed. Yeah, so I know that's where I'm going to leave you. As I said that again, my students and postdocs will be there in table number 21 if you want to hear about our research. We work on remediation of soil, water, and wastewater. Please. Thank you.
Dr. Zhang. All right. right, thank you so much again for the opportunity to join this distinguished panel. So first of all, I'd like to introduce myself very briefly. My name is Zhang, professor in the Civil Environmental Engineering Department with a secondary appointment with the Chemical Materials Engineering Department. So today, I'm not sure if you've ever seen this picture here showing the mapping of the PFAS level in New Jersey particularly. This is from EPA webinar talk. As you can see, we're heavily polluted, especially in the central areas of New Jersey. You can see the levels range from a few ppt to 100 ppt. So according to EPA, we are going to have maybe 10% of the public drinking water system that are subject to interventions to meet the new regulations. And we're looking at about $1.5 billion every year to upgrade the system, treatment strategies, and other logistic issues. So as you can see, many treatment technologies out there, such as the granular active carbon, may not be sufficient for the emerging contaminants. I'm also interested in whether you saw this picture, this diagram that shows basically the maturity as well as a technical feasibility levels for different kinds of technologies. As you can see, there are two groups. One is primarily for capture concentration, such as the black box technologies like active carbon exchange. So they're pretty mature as well as also technically feasible. There are some other emerging technologies. For example, in the center one, the one that we're actually working on, the blue or no red box encapsulate the electrochemical oxidation. They are very important for destruction type, PFAS. Actually, as I mentioned in the past, we still have the problem in the wash water, backwash water. They're still there, even though we just basically separate them from the water. So now my topic is mainly focused on the technology we foster or develop in my lab dedicated to the water, wastewater remediation, soil remediation, as well as the community engagement. So speaking of water, wastewater, I have basically the separation-based or separation-only approaches using the foam fractionation. We can use the nanobubbles, as my previous mentioned, so to eliminate the PFAS from a highly concentrated or highly dirty water like landfill leachate and brine wastewater that we can barely use of membrane filtration active carbon. And the second one is a traditional or commercial reverse osmosis and nanofiltration membranes. They are still suffering lots of problems. For example, the short chain PFAS removal rates are still low, as well as matrix effects. And then I also have kind of integrated approaches that enhance the degradation as well as, in the meantime, we separate them using the electrochemically active membranes where we can put the conductive nanomaterials to absorb PFAS first and then concentrate their basically level on the surface. Then we can enhance their degradation in situ using this electrochemical oxidation or reduction technology. And the second one is probably new to you. It's called a microwave catalysis membrane systems, where the reason I brought it up is that, catalytic membranes or even the electrochemical membranes are not very popular field because it's really hard to deliver the energy into the industrial relevant membrane systems, right? So we're using microwave. Microwave, we use it for food heating. We don't worry about the penetration of energy. So somewhat we are able to achieve pretty good PFAS removal from the the industrial wastewater tap. And then for the soil remediation, we also have efforts on the PFAS separation, basically using foam, the nanobubble water to enhance the hydrophobic compounds removal, not merely PFAS, but also heavy metals and other compounds that could be removed by the foam, by the nanobubble water. And then the second one is, again, the microwave enhanced the catalytic systems where you can blend in the catalyst into the soil where the PFAS could interact with the catalyst, and then we can insert the industrial membrane injector to to deliver the energy without the worry about the penetration because they are highly penetrating. And then the soil, not merely the soil, we're looking at biosolids and use the spend the carbon absorbent and exchange resins. There are basically having a lot of PFAS on there. We should certainly dispose them through the, for example, thermal degradation incineration processes. Those two projects here are not led by my group, but we're part of them. Their efforts, and then especially the last one, the ball milling technology, the mechanical oxidation technology. We can put the catalyst and blend it with the solids, and then roll it up and enhance the degradation for the solid waste. So my most powerful approach is industrial and community partnerships. So this is something I really feel proud of. So you can see we are funded by the NJIT to look at the PFAS and microplastic pollution in food waste. And you can see the photo there is a recent the photo we took for the fish fillet, scotfish. We detected PFAS for the edible fish already. And also landfill leaches, we are funded by the Meadowlands Research and Restoration Institute. We also have data showing that we are exposed to PFAS. All right, so really quick. So the last one, the airborne PFAS also. We believe we are the first group that reported the airborne PFAS level in New Jersey, Newark. So you may wonder how much levels we're exposed to. Yes, they are there in the air. They could deposit on our surface or rivers through the deposition rainfalls and particulates. And then last but not least, so I think to empower the communities with the knowledge, and I think the development of sensors are critical. So fortunately, I have colleagues from chemical engineering, like Dr. Mengqiang Zhao and Dr. Shaknik Basuri. They're all working on the sensoring technology that somewhat, someday we could be, benefit from those technologies. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
So, first of all, let's give a good round of applause to all of the panelists. And I apologize for the time shortness, but the objective over here was to give you a broader spectrum of the technologies and the innovation that is coming out from the academia and is in different stages of the research translation to market. All of them have the tables, and this is specifically why the showcase was put over there, because as Dr. Sarkar said, I can give them 2.5 hours and they will not be done. So the idea was that you got some brief overview, you have some more questions about them, and there are, there are about 15 plus academic researchers who are showcasing, so ask them the question during the showcase. If you have any one or two quick questions, we can take care of that. Anybody would like to ask any questions? Yeah, Judith.
Hi, I'm with the Commission on Science, Innovation, and Technology. Excellent presentations. I guess one comment I'd like to make is the Commission has some grant funding available once you become a company. We have a program that provides grants to use specialized equipment at New Jersey universities. And I know some of the companies that I've supported have used some of the labs from these academic institutions. We also have coming up a clean tech seed grant, which is $75,000 for a competitive opportunity. And the company that Craig Arnold talked about with Rod Priestley Aquapo had received one of our $75,000 R&D grants. We've got some ways to help you along that commercialization pathways, and we look forward to having further conversations with all of you.
Great. One more question, because we are going to come back at, Nick said, from 2 to 2:30 to have more questions to all the presenters. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes. Thanks, Adam. Thanks to the panelists and the presentations and showcasing everything that's going on here at NJIT and across the state. My question to you is the following: every day, every time there's new PFAS that's been that we're discovering. As at the last check, the review that I published last year, there were over 10,000 PFAS. But we focused primarily at this meeting on P4 and PFOS. So first of all, what are we going to do with all the new ones that's been developed, all the technologies that are actually absorbing them and pushing the solution, the problem forward, because we're literally collecting them from one media to the next. Are we degrading, and what is it? So I'm looking for more detailed solution to this problem. Thank you.
This is a great question, and this is actually a very good point to discuss in the start at the 2 o'clock, because it is something that no one particular sector would be able to address it. But when we are going to come back at 2 o'clock, we are going to have all the people from academia, from industry, from community, utilities company to talk about it, that how do we prioritize our strategies, and how do we form those partnerships which are necessary to move the research innovation to the practical solutions, right? So we'll come back and start with that particular discussion at 2 o'clock.